Hey, sports history fans, this is Ariel Gonzalez from Wrestling with Heels On. Hey, when you go to a sporting event, you don't go there to be meek and mild, unless you live in Japan. You go there to get freaking wild. That means bringing some attitude to your amplitude. How do you do that? You get Racket. R-A-K-I-T. Racket combines a compact 7-inch megaphone, 8 powerful adjustable LED lights, noisemakers, an insert you design, and it's all fully customizable to match your team's colors. Now here's the coolest thing about this product. J.J. Abraham, the founder, was the ultimate cheer dad. He followed his daughter's cheer group around the country, and he saw parents struggling using all sorts of crazy contraptions to make some noise for their kids. And then he had an aha moment. He thought, wait, why not combine all of these doodads into an all-in-one compact device for the ultimate fan? JJ and his team worked 3 years on developing version after version after version until they finally landed on Racket, R-A-K-I-T, so you can make some noise and cheer and be a part of the action. So get out there and let's get loud. Bring a racket to your next game or competition to cheer on your favorite team or athlete. You can customize your racket with your own logos, drawings, and names. Get beads to match your team's colors. Flashing lights add to the excitement. Are you ready to make a racket? Be part of the game. Each racket pack comes with 1 racket megaphone, 1 lanyard to keep a hold of the thing, 2 scratch-resistant bead packs, 1 clear and 1 color of your choice, and a 10-pack of customizable self-adhesive inserts. Currently on sale, wait for it, $24.99. To pick up your racket today, head to myracket.com. That's myraket.com. Now get out there and make some noise. Is us.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
The Rose Bowl. The game that inspired the college football bowl season has a long and storied history. The stadium itself is 100 years old, and in celebration of it, Pigskin Dispatch is assembling some of the top historians and authors to share the memories, people, and events that make the granddaddy of them all the special game that it is. Enjoy this Rose Bowl memory from pigskindispatch.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your place for all great football history. And we have some excellent football history today because we're talking about more Rose Bowl games, people, places, and events that aspired from that great venue out in Pasadena, California. And we have some great historians to share it with us. And another one tonight is Matthew DiBiase. Matthew, welcome back to the Pig Pen to talk about some more Rose Bowl.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for having me back on again. It's always an honor and a privilege.
Honor is all ours because your history and your research on this history of football is just excellent. And we love how you give us the backgrounds on many of these players and especially the coaches from your very excellent books that you have out there. Gives us a great baseline for what's going on in these games. So what are you going to talk about tonight, Matthew?
I'd like for us to talk about the 1935 Rose Bowl featuring the Alabama Crimson Tide versus Stanford University. The 1935 Rose Bowl was significant in that it was the last college football game played by Alabama Crimson Tide pass-catching immortal Don Hutson and future NFL immortal. Yeah, this was his last college football game. It's significant because I believe it was the 3rd time that Alabama University again appeared in the Rose Bowl there. It was also the first Rose Bowl appearance, I believe the first Rose Bowl appearance by the head coach at Alabama, Frank Thomas, who succeeded Wallace Wade, who had led Alabama to their first Rose Bowl appearance in 1926. he was now the head coach at Alabama University, and this was their first return here. And also in 1934, according to one of the retroactive organizations, this 1934 Alabama team that appeared in the 1935 Rose Bowl won a mythical national championship there, as did the 1925 Alabama Crimson Tide did, and when they won the 1926 Rose Bowl there, another mythical national championship. Actually, that 25 Alabama team was a consensus. Like 4 of the major retroactive organizations that evaluate national champions, they all said, yeah, it was unanimous. He said, yeah, that 25 Alabama team was a national champion. And one of the retroactive organizations, I forget which one, I think it was Billingsley or the Holgate system, ruled this 1934 Alabama team was a national champion. So they, again, had a perfect record. They were 9-0 going into the game, and they were taking on Stanford University, who, although they didn't have a perfect record, they were unbeaten. They were 9-0-1. And this Stanford team they were taking on was a pretty tough team too. This was I believe, the second Rose Bowl appearance by what college football historians call the Vowel Boys. The Stanford team were called the Vowel Boys because in their rivalry against USC and this team, they lost to USC. And the players who took part in that game were so stung by that loss, they made a solemn vow to themselves that as long as we're together, we continue playing in Stanford University, the remainder of our eligibility, we will never lose to USC ever again. And guess what? They kept that promise. For the next 3 years, they beat USC, and they are the power and what we now know as the Pac-12 conference, but that back then was simply called the Pacific Conference. They made 3 consecutive Rose Bowl appearances. The first Rose Bowl appearance by the Vowel Boys, they lost to Columbia University on a fluke play. It was a naked reverse that fooled everyone on the Stanford team, and they lost. But they came back again. In 1934, they came back again. They had an unbeaten record, and they were going to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, the Crimson Tide under Frank Thomas. Thomas was Wallace Wade's successor. In our previous show, we talked about Wallace Wade. Wallace Wade, I believe he left, his last season was 1931, where, again, he led Alabama to a Rose Bowl victory. And I think was at one of those mythical national championships. He moved on to Duke University because Wallace Wade was having trouble getting along with Alabama President Denny. I forget Denny's first name. Both 2 very dominant personalities, and there's only room for one dominant personality. And Wallace Wade spent some time looking for a golden parachute, and he found it at Duke University because this is during the Great Depression now. Duke was offering mucho money, much more money than he was getting in Alabama. And also, they promised never to get in his way and bother him, whereas at Alabama, Denny was getting in his way. So Wallace Wade, he found a golden parachute. He is out of there. And the man who takes his place is Frank Thomas. And Frank Thomas's pedigree, he was one of Knute Rockne's bright boys. He was a teammate of the George Gipp, the Gipper, the original Gipper, during those unbeaten teams. He was the quarterback in the backfield of those Notre Dame teams that featured George Gipp that won national championships in 1919 and 1920. Incredibly smart, brilliant individual. He was born, I think he was the child of Welsh immigrants, lived in Indiana, played under Rockne, and Rockne saw they had coaching potential. I mean, he was brilliant. He was like a coach on the field, and Rockne encouraged him to get into coaching. And after he graduated, he was doing assistant coaching work. He was like an assistant coach at Georgia Tech. And in fact, he introduced the famed Notre Dame box formation with its with its backfield shifting and tricky reverses and all that to Georgia Tech, which revolutionized its offense and all that. And then later, his first head coaching job was at Chattanooga University there. It was just very small. It was kind of like small. There was no such thing as Division II back then, but you could say it was like Division II player right now. But he was doing good work. And then finally, Wallace Wade tapped him to be an assistant coach at Alabama. So he saw his potential there. And basically, he let Thomas know, he said, I'm on my way out. I want you to succeed me. In fact, he recommended that Thomas be his successor when he did leave Alabama after the 1931 season. So Thomas takes over, and he alters the Alabama offense Whereas Wallace Wade was using a punt, pass, and a prayer at Alabama, now Thomas is using the Notre Dame box, which is a lot of quickness, a lot of backfield shifting, reverses, what they call spinners, lots of ball manipulation, tricky concealment and all that, fakes, play fakes. And he's got some bright young talents, and he's got three very bright young talents. A tailback named Dixie Howell that had a real good cannon for an arm, and a fast offensive end with blazing speed named Don Hudson, a golden-haired beauty named Don Hudson. And Howell to Hudson was the greatest passing tandem in college football in the 1930s. I mean, Hudson had just blazing speed. I mean, he would leave everyone in the dust. And the other offensive end and defensive end, because these guys all played two-way football, even Hudson played both ways, was a big bear-like guy with very bushy eyebrows, tough, named Paul Bear Bryant. And yeah, he was the other end, but he wasn't much of a pass catcher, but boy, he was a run blocker. And if any opponent ever took a cheap shot on one of his teammates, guess who the enforcer was? Bear Bryant.
Oh,
and
no
he
kidding.
would pay. Oh yeah, he would. If you got dirty, he would get dirty with you back, and he would hurt you. He was big for his time, big and hulking, and he was a toughie. And on defense, he would kill you. He'd level everybody there. So that was the golden triumvirate for Alabama football there in that game. And they all went out on the West Coast there, and Thomas was kind of a little more, in terms of his personality, he was nicer. I mean, he was still disciplined, but he was not the steely-eyed guy like Wallace Wade was. I mean, it was a bit of a softer side, and he was a mentor. In fact, it was he who saw the coaching potential in Bear Bryant. He said, when you're done playing, I want you to think about coaching. And Bear Bryant immediately took to it like a duck to water. In fact, he started off as an assistant coach under Frank Thomas until finally he began his own head coaching career, like at the University of Maryland and all of that in the 1940s, and in the Navy, and then after World War II, at the University of Kentucky. But it was Thomas who saw that potential, and in fact, Bear Bryant was heavily influenced by Thomas. His emphasis on quickness. Other teams might have bigger in size, but they couldn't outquick his teams. The use of trickery, fakery, and all that, emphasis on the ground game and stuff like that, all came from Frank Thomas there, who, of course, learned it from Knute Rockne. So you've got that lineage there. Yeah, it all goes back to Rockne and all that, shifting and all that. And also not afraid, the emphasis on building great quarterbacks, because I think about Bear Bryant. Yeah, he built some great quarterbacks. Kenny Stabler, Joe Namath, Jeff Rutledge. Yeah. That's another thing about that. Yeah, Bay Perilli at University of Kentucky there. He did some great ones. Yeah.
Most definitely did. So you mentioned in a previous episode, that the Alabama game from in 1920s, the first appearance by Alabama was the first national radio broadcast, and it inspired a young Bear Bryant who was listening to that radio broadcast when Alabama won. So, now we see it coming a little bit more full circle, him as one of the key players in that Alabama attack, and, later on as a coach. So great job.
I like to emphasize one point to our listeners. People are so used to the fact today that always in the Rose Bowl, it's usually the Big Ten representative taking on the Pac-12 representative. But before 1947, that was not so. It was wide open. Anybody could really play in that Rose Bowl game. You had a West Coast representative. Usually, what was now the Pac-12. Back then, it was called the Pacific Coast Conference. But the Eastern representative could be anybody. It could be from the South, from the Northeast, Midwest. It was wide open back then. It wasn't institutionalized, the Big Ten taking on the Pac-12 until 1947. So it was very wide open. And in many ways, the Rose Bowl was kind of seen as a national championship game in certain respects. I mean, this is especially before the poll era, which began in 1936 when the AP poll came out with its first national champion there. it was seen in that light. Usually the team that would win the Rose Bowl would kind of be seen as kind of like a national champion in the unofficial mythical sense there. Just want to clarify to our listeners here.
Okay.
Yeah, and also by 35, I think also that's when you see the beginning of the other bowl games. I think was it 34 or 35, you see Cotton Bowl, you see the Orange Bowl, and then the Sugar Bowl, and then as years pass, you also see the lesser bowl games being developed and all that. But by 34 or 35, you start seeing the major bowl games being introduced that we know and love today.
All right.
Yeah.
So we got these two outstanding teams, meeting at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. But what happened during the game?
Stanford draws first blood. Bobby Grayson, their tailback, scores and all that. But then starting in the second quarter, it is all Alabama. They score 22 unanswered points. Dixie Howell, the tailback, scores on a 5-yard touchdown plunge. Then Alabama kicks a field goal. Make it 9-7, and then Dixie Howell scores on another a touchdown, a 67-yard touchdown run there. So he scores 2 touchdowns, and then to end the second quarter, he hits Don Hudson on a 54-yard bomb on a bomb there. No, actually, it's not Howell who throws it. It's Riley there who throws the touchdown pass. But again, Hudson, he breaks it loose. Then in the third quarter, Stanford kind of comes back and makes it close. They get another touchdown to make it 22-12. So kind of semi-close, but in the fourth quarter, Hudson clinches the game. A 59-yard touchdown pass from Dixie Howell. That ices the game, and they win 29-13. And again, it was Don Hudson's last college football game. There was no NFL draft, but he drew the eyes of Curly Lambeau of the Green Bay Packers, who signs him to a pro contract. And Don Hudson scores a touchdown on his very first play from scrimmage in his very first NFL game. And he literally becomes the NFL pass catching record book. He set the standard for all future NFL pass catchers to emulate and eventually surpass. And a lot of them, it took years. Receiving yardage, touchdowns scored. I mean, before Jim Brown came along, it was Don Hudson who scored more touchdowns than any other NFL player, 99 in his career. And then finally, Jim Brown broke it. I think today Don Hudson still holds the NFL record for most points scored in a game. Was it 40? I think he scored 41 or something like that. I think that's still the NFL record, if I'm not mistaken, Darren. If I recall correctly. I think it is. I think it is.
Yeah, it's right up there. I know that. Yeah.
Very close. Very close in all that.
But you think about this, back in the 1920s and, for college game in the 20s and 30s and 40s when Hudson's playing, passing the ball was not the popular method of offense. It was still the running game, and you wanted, the brute force of just pounding away at your opponents. And, when you have somebody that's doing this that nobody else is doing, things that nobody else is doing, catching these long passes, running these pass routes, so crisp and just outrunning people, blowing right by them. Defenses weren't ready for that. And he really, like you said, he really put the game of football on notice that, hey, you can win by throwing the ball. And
And those early defenses in those days, in the 20s, they were using like a 7-2-2 defense, and then later became like a 6-2-3 defense. But if you're in a double wing formation, you've got 2 ends and 2 wing backs. If you flood the passing lanes with 4 receivers, all the tailback has to do, if he's got time, is wait for the open man, wait for that safety to commit to someone, and boom, hit the open man. I mean, Sammy Baugh did that all the time when he was with the Washington Redskins. He did that to perfection. And they had to alter defenses to accommodate, the fact that you could flood it with 4 pass catchers and all that. And Hudson was no exception. I mean, it wasn't exactly precise routes that we know today where you take X amount of steps. He was allowed basically to articulate his own routes. And basically what Dixie Howe was waiting was, I'm waiting for Don to get open. The moment he gets open, boom, then I can hit him. But it was Hudson who would he was kind of improvising. He would just articulate, he would kind of work out his own little routes. It wasn't really prescribed. It was him using his instincts, finding seams, and then running to daylight, and then Dixie Howell waiting for him to, okay, now I find a seam, boom, hit him like that. And again, when Hudson went to the NFL, just like Red Grange did in the mid-1920s, Hudson's going to the NFL, again, added greater legitimacy to NFL football. And it was an inspiration to other college football prospects. And hey, Hudson can do it in the NFL. If he can do it, I can do it. And you start seeing other future college football greats like Sammy Ball, Tuffy Lemons, and Bulldog Turner, and guys like that. Okay, Sid Luckman. Okay, I can play in the pros too. And they do, and they become pro football legends. And they really help the NFL really establish an even stronger footprint, in the American football consciousness.
All right. Well, Matthew, you have some great research that you did on this, and a good segue into that is you have you talked a little bit about the NFL just now. You've talked about college because of the Rose Bowl. You have some great research on a couple great gridiron books that talk about a lot about history that are very interesting. If you could pass on the names of those books and where folks could get them, really appreciate that.
Thanks, Darren. My third book, Lords of the Gridiron, College Football's Greatest Coaches, is up on Amazon. It's not available in stores. You must purchase it online at Amazon. It's presently on sale right now at 30% off and will remain on sale until after the national championship game is played in mid-January. So if you're looking for a stocking stuffer for Christmas, if you're a fan, if you love Alabama college football or just college football in general, buy this book, because you always wanted to know who the great college football coaches were, who was the greatest of all time. My book answers that question. And if you're a pro football coach, if you want to know what Don Hudson did with the Green Bay Packers, my latest book, which was just released last September, is Lords of the Gridiron 2, in Roman numeral 2, Pro Football's Greatest Coaches. It too is on sale at 30% off and will remain on sale at 30% off until after Super Bowl 57 is played in mid-February. So if you love pro football, and I cover all the great teams, it covers all the great coaches and bases there. You want to know who are the greatest NFL head coaches of all time? My book answers that question there in beautiful detail. And again, you can only buy it at Amazon. It's not available in stores. So please purchase it online. And if you want to know how you spell my last name, it's Matthew with 2 T's, and my last name is DiBiase. Just type it in and you'll see my books and buy to your heart's content.
All right, Matthew, appreciate you sharing this more great football history, more great Rose Bowl history, and your research is impeccable, and we really love the stories that you tell and the picture that you paint, and really appreciate you, sir. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Darren. It's always an honor and privilege, and can't wait to do this again.
We're taking a peek over at the chains and the down marker. It's 4th and long. We're going to have to punt the ball and get on out of here, but we'll have another series tomorrow for your football history headlines, so be sure to tune in. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast. Pigskindispatch.com is a proud affiliate of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of sports yesteryear.
Hello, I'm Joe Ziemba, the host of the podcast When Football Was Football, and I'm pleased to announce that I'm partnering with the Sports History Network to give away 2 copies of my new book, Bears vs. Cardinals, the NFL's Oldest Rivalry, published by McFarland Books. To enter this contest, simply go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. Winners will be announced on December 19th, and we'll make sure that your personalized copy is received before December 25th. And we hope you'll enjoy tales in the book, such as the time a player for the Cardinals actually owned the Chicago Bears, or how members of the Bears faced down Al Capone. You'll meet a fullback who became a spy and learn about the Bears who partied with presidents. Once again, to enter this free giveaway, go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. Thank you.